All right. Good morning, everyone. Caspal, am I audible?
Yes, Kevin, you are audible.
So, welcome to today's episode of our February webinar series. And today we want to look at root cause analysis in external quality assurance outliers. And today we are giving it a practical approach from the lab. So, we want to look at what is an EQ outlier for an EQ, what is an EQ outlier and what are its implications? We want to define a structured root cause analysis method. And then we will also be able to distinguish between random and systemic causes of EQ outliers. And then we'll be able to develop an effective corrective and preventive action plans. And then we'll be able to understand how to document investigations for audit and accreditation purposes. So our presenter today is Mr. Caspal Okelo. Caspal is currently the lab manager for Metropolis Healthcare Kisumu. And Caspal is a certified QMS consultant with a strong background in ISO-aligned QMS implementation and accreditation readiness. He is experienced in lab audits, CAPA management, and continuous quality improvement. Caspal is passionate about diagnostic accuracy, patient safety, and health system strengthening, and is also a mentor to multidisciplinary lab teams. So allow me to invite Caspal to just take it through and go ahead with his presentation.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I'll say good morning once again, colleagues. As Kevin has rightly introduced, today we are going to discuss something that every laboratory has experienced at some point. I believe all of us have heard about an EQA outlier. And the key question that we are going to ask ourselves today is shifting from who made the mistake to what in our system allowed this to happen. And as has been introduced, this session is going to be a practical approach. And the aim is that after 1 hour, you'll return to your lab and immediately strengthen how you investigate EQA failures. My name is Caspal Okelo. Currently, I'm the laboratory manager at Metropolis Kisumu. And I'm also a certified QMS consultant, as Kevin has introduced. I guide and mentor labs towards accreditation. Let's get into our objectives for this day or for the next 1 hour, which will set a precedence for how you'll be handling your EQA outliers henceforth in your labs. By the end of this session, you should be able to first clearly define what an EQA outlier truly means beyond just the bad SDI. Secondly, you should be able to apply a structured root cause analysis method instead of doing a formal guess. Thirdly, by the end of this session, we aim to ensure that you'll be able to distinguish between a one-off random error and a deeper systemic problem. Our fourth objective will be to be able to implement corrective and preventive actions, not just quick fixes for our outliers. And finally, the last objective of this session will be you should be able to document your investigation in a way that is audit ready and compliant. Let's proceed. Why does EQA matters? These are foundations that we are setting for the gist of our discussion later on. EQA is not just about comparison with other labs. As we know, it tells us whether our results are accurate when tested against a wider peer group. And if we are ISO accredited or planning to be, our EQA will be a reflection of the strength of our entire quality system. Greatest of all is that EQA protects patients, and that's the ultimate reason, beyond being a regulatory compliance in support of ISO 1519. After understanding EQA, let us get into the discussion. What is an EQA outlier? We've been mentioning from the onset about EQA outliers. What is an EQA outlier? An outlier simply means our result falls outside acceptable statistical limits. This could be a high SDI, or what we call the Z-score. It could be a high percentage deviation from the target. It could be outside the target range. But remember, sometimes it's not an analytical error that causes an outlier. It could be a wrong unit that was submitted, a decimal point error, or a peer group misclassification. So an outlier is a signal and not automatically a system failure. Let us now discuss why EQA outliers truly matter. And colleagues, it's easy to see an outlier as just a bad score, or as we've defined, just a number outside the acceptable limits. But EQA outliers are much more than that. First and foremost, EQA outliers matter for the sake of patient safety. If our EQA result is significantly biased, we must ask ourselves, is this bias affecting patient samples? For example, if my HbA1c is consistently reading 1% higher, I might misclassify patients as poorly controlled diabetics. And what we are familiar with potassium, if it's falsely elevated, we might end up having clinicians treating hyperkalemia that does not exist. Secondly, EQA outliers matter because they are significant in clinical decision making. As I've mentioned, the clinicians rely on us. Laboratory data will influence diagnosis. The results we produce influence initiation of treatment. It influences dose adjustments and monitoring of therapy. And an inaccurate result will affect real medical decisions. The third significance of EQA outliers is that they show hidden system weaknesses. EQA is like what I define as a stress test. A stress test for the laboratory system, which is aimed at uncovering maybe calibration stability, reagent lot bias, things like poor QC review processes, or weak documentation system. So the outlier often exposes weaknesses that we did not know existed. Fourthly, EQA outliers matter for accreditation and regulatory consequences. For laboratories, our laboratories who are working towards or maintaining ISO 15189 accreditation, if you have repeated EQA failures, it will raise concerns about system control, and accreditation bodies expect structured investigation. They expect corrective action, and they expect preventive action. And failure to demonstrate proper RCA can lead to nonconformities. But now, let us shift perspective from EQA outlier being a risk to seeing every outlier as an opportunity. Outliers are an opportunity to strengthen our SOPs. Outliers are an opportunity to reinforce training, and they give us opportunity to improve monitoring systems. Outliers also present an opportunity to mature the laboratory's quality culture. So the difference between a struggling laboratory and a high-performing laboratory will not be whether the outliers occur. It's because outliers happen everywhere, from the smallest laboratory to the largest laboratories. The difference is how the laboratory responds. Does your laboratory react defensively, or do we respond systematically? If we respond systematically, each outlier will make the laboratory stronger. And this is why EQA outliers matter. They are signals, and how we respond determines whether they become threats or tools for improvement. So now that we understand why EQA outliers matter, let us look at why they commonly happen, especially in a laboratory environment. And it's important to be realistic. quality issues never occur in isolation. They occur within operational realities. And let us walk through the phases of testing, normal sample testing. The same happens with outliers, and throughout these phases, EQA outliers will occur. The pre-analytical phase, in the pre-analytical phase, we have pre-analytical causes. In as much EQA samples are not routine patient samples, the pre-analytical issues still occur. For example, improper reconstitution of lyophilized EQA samples, you use the wrong volume of diluent, there's inadequate mixing before analysis, improper storage after reconstitution, and these small deviations in the pre-analytical phase, they significantly affect results, especially in departments like chemistry or immunoassay testing. And sometimes the problem starts even before the sample reaches the analyzer. Secondly, analytical causes. This is where most of the investigations focus, investigations of EQA outliers. And common analytical causes include calibration drifts, reagent lot variations, expired or improperly stored reagents, instrument malfunctions, inadequate maintenance, or simply ignoring subtle QC trends. And one of the most frequent causes that I've observed is failure to perform proper verification between reagent lots. And another common issue is assuming that if QC is within range, then everything is fine, even when there is a developing trend. Because QC within limits does not always mean the QC is stable. Post-analytically, these are the causes which are often underestimated, and examples are like transcription errors during result submission, selection of wrong units, decimal point misplacement, or submitting results to the wrong peer group. And many EQA failures, in quote, are actually submission errors. This is why we emphasized earlier that you need to verify data before doing a deep investigation. Now, I think let's talk honestly about contextual challenges. These are the system factors that cause EQA failures. In many laboratories, especially in resource-constrained settings, we will face power interruptions that will affect, that often affect analyzer stability. There's delayed maintenance due to service contract limitations. You have reagent stockouts leading to emergency substitutions, or high workloads and staff rotations with limited supervision during peak hours. And these realities always affect, influence the stability of the system. So when performing a root cause analysis, we must consider a holistic approach, including environmental and operational factors, not just the technical performance. So when an outlier occurs, when an EQA report shows an outlier, the first reaction in many laboratories is often anxiety. People will immediately ask, what went wrong? Oh, who ran this test? But the correct first response is not to panic. The first response should be a structured verification. So before launching a full investigation, you need to confirm something that is very basic. Was the correct result submitted? You'll check your submission record, you'll compare it with the analyzer printout, you'll confirm the units, you'll confirm the decimal placement, you need to confirm peer group selection. And when all this is done, you'll be surprised at how often EQA outliers are due to clerical errors. The clerical errors like maybe a misplaced decimal point, you selected millimoles per liter instead of milligrams per liter. So you need to verify data before investigating the system, simply put. So once submission accuracy is confirmed, the next step is to examine internal quality control. Internal QC is your, I call it your early warning system. And you need to ask the following questions. The questions are like, on the day the EQA sample was run, was your QC within acceptable limits? Was there any wasteguard rule violations? Was there any shift in your QC? Was there a trend? Did anyone notice a gradual shift, a gradual drift in the lead up to the day? And sometimes QC is technically within range, but clearly trending upwards or trending downwards. And that trend might explain EQA bias. If QC was out of control and still the EQA sample was processed, that suggests a procedural weakness. And if QC was trending but was ignored, that suggests a monitoring weakness. QC will often tell us the story before even EQA confirming. And that is why daily QC review and trend analysis are critical in our lab settings. EQA is periodic, remember, you don't do your EQA daily, but QC is a continuous thing. If QC is not properly reviewed, your EQA failure should not come as much of a surprise to you. So you've reviewed your QC. Now we are moving deeper into the investigation of our outlier. You start thinking like an investigator and you reconstruct the events of the day. You ask things like, what reagent lot was in use? Was this a newly introduced lot? Was the calibration performed recently? Was the calibration documented? Was preventive maintenance up to date? Who performed the analysis? Were they trained and competent? Were there environmental issues like power fluctuations, temperature instability? And sometimes you realize that even small environmental changes can affect sensitive assays. And reconstructing the testing day will help identify contributing factors. So we need not to rely on memory. Always use documentation. Have your maintenance logs, calibration records, QC charts, temperature logs, reagent inventory records. A structured reconstruction of this day will prevent assumptions. And remember, as I've been emphasizing throughout this presentation, is root cause analysis should be evidence-based and not opinion-based. So we proceed. What is root cause analysis? What is root cause analysis? Now that we've verified the data, reviewed the QC and reconstructed the testing day, we are ready to do something that is more structured. And this is where root cause analysis is going to come in. Root cause analysis, or RCA, is a structured method which is used to identify the true underlying cause of the problem. Not the visible error, not the immediate trigger, but the deeper system weakness that allowed this error to occur. Let me emphasize something important at this point. RCA, or root cause analysis, is not about assigning blame. It's rather about strengthening your systems. And if we conclude that, let's say after my root cause analysis, I conclude that the root cause was technologist error, it means that we've not gone deep enough. Because even we understand that human error usually occurs within a weak system. For example, if calibration was missed, is the root cause that someone forgot, or is it the root cause that there is no automated reminder system? You understand? Was there a maintenance tracking log? Was there a supervisory review checklist? So RCA kind of shifts us, it forces us rather to shift from what went wrong to why did our system allow this to go wrong? And this shift is very powerful. A laboratory that masters root cause analysis becomes proactive instead of being reactive. Instead of repeatedly fighting the same problems, Monday morning, Tuesday morning, you're fighting the same problem, a structured root cause analysis will help us remove the structural weaknesses. And another important principle that I want us to emphasize at this point is that root cause analysis must be evidence-based. It must rely on documented records, your QC charts, maintenance logs, SOPs, and it should not rely on assumptions. And if RCA starts becoming guesswork, it loses credibility. And when done properly, RCA will transform an EQA outlier from a failure into a quality improvement opportunity. And this is the mindset I want us to build. Now, let us look at the specific tools that we use to do root cause analysis systematically. The first tool is the 5 whys technique or 5 whys analysis. It's a simple tool, but extremely powerful when we use it correctly. So the principle here is straightforward in the 5 whys technique. When a problem occurs, we need to ask why repeatedly, typically 5 times, until we reach the true underlying system failure. And I want to emphasize something important. The goal of the analysis is not to stop when you find a person or you find the person who made the error. The goal is you continue until you find the process weakness that allowed the error to occur. So let's walk through these slowly. 5 whys, a simple 5 whys structure. In case, let's say, HbA1c was high. The first why will be, why was HbA1c? EQA result high. Once you get the response to that, you move to why did the analyzer produce biased results? You get the answer to that. Why was calibration insufficient? You get the answer to that. Why was load verification not performed? And the next, finally, you end up to why was there no enforcement mechanism? So your response to the first why will guide the next why. Why is it happening? Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Until you reach the root cause. So you notice something critical is that the root cause will not end up at technologist error. It will always end up by the fifth why. It will always end up at the system gap that structured questioning will have forced you to go to. So without depth, you are just going to fix symptoms. But with depth, you'll realize that you are going to fix systems. So the second tool that is used is the fishbone diagram. This is what we call the Ishikawa diagram. And this tool is especially useful when the cause is not obvious or multiple factors might be contributing to your EQA failure. Also, the Ishikawa diagram is used when you want team brainstorming. You lead a team and you need the entire team to be involved instead of just the quality assurance manager. So instead of asking why repeatedly in a straight line, in the fishbone, using the fishbone tool, we explore categories of possible causes. So in the laboratory setting, we have six useful categories that we explore with the fishbone diagram. We explore personnel, we explore equipment, we explore the method, we explore the materials, we explore the measurement, and we explore the environment. So I want us to apply this to our case later on. So we need to distinguish the type of causes because we are doing a root cause. You might end up at a cause. The distinction between the types of causes is extremely important because at the simple level is that random causes are one-time and predictable events. For example, a typing error during EQA submission, accidental sample contamination, or temporary equipment malfunction. So random errors do not necessarily indicate a flawed system. Then systematic causes, on the other hand, are embedded in your laboratory process. For example, there was no load verification SOP. There is no QC review meetings. There are no maintenance tracking systems. There's a poor documentation culture. And systemic causes will always repeat until they are corrected. And this is why some labs fail EQA repeatedly. You find that they're in the same analyte, you are failing EQA repeatedly because you are treating systemic causes as random events. And as leaders in laboratory practice, we must learn to recognize patterns. One outlier may be random, but repeated bias always indicates a system issue. Now, after all the discussion, we say that we are going to do a practical approach. So I want to give us a case study to investigate a root cause. You have your EQA result and your HbA1c is an outlier at 2.8, positive 2.8 SDI. That's an outlier. So you do your investigation of the day, you checked your submission, the results were okay, there were no transcription errors. You've done your investigation, you've reconstructed the day, you've investigated the QC for that on that day and the lead up. Then you realize that before you did your EQA sample, your IQC was trending high. You had a reagent lot that was changed 1 week prior, and calibration was performed well. So what are you going to investigate first? What should we investigate first? And let me emphasize that a good investigation will always start with data and not assumptions. So to investigate this, we are going to apply the 5 whys analysis. Why number 1? Why was EQA results high? You ask yourself, why was my EQA HbA1c result high? So you realize that it was high because the analyzer produced a positively biased results compared to peer laboratory, because in isolation it can't be high, but compared to other peer laboratories, it was positively biased. And we ask ourselves, is this random or systemic? So since you found out that IQC was trending high, this would suggest a systematic bias. You proceed and ask why number 2. Why was there a positive bias in patient and EQA samples? You say that this is a systematic bias, being that IQC was trending high. You ask why was there positive bias in patient EQA samples? In your investigation, you answer and find out that this is because a new reagent lot that was installed a week prior produced slightly higher readings than the previous lot. And this is supported by your IQC trending upwards after lot change. You move to the third why. Why number 3? Why did the new reagent lot produce higher results? The response is because proper lot-to-lot verification was not performed before implementation. Instead, somebody introduced the new lot and only did routine calibration and proceeded. So we are approaching the process gap. We've moved from who changed the lot. Now we've realized that the lot was changed and there was no lot verification. Why number 4? Why was lot-to-lot verification not performed? You realize that it's because your laboratory does not have a formal SOP requiring documented lot verification before use. Or this SOP exists, but it was not enforced or it was not monitored. Now you see that this is no longer about HbA1c. We've now moved from the single HbA1c result that was high to a system control. And why you lead to your 5th why? Why does the laboratory lack an enforced lot verification system? A systemic issue. Because there's no structured quality oversight mechanism that is supposed to ensure that SOP compliance is monitored. There's no mandatory documentation review. There's no defined accountability for reagent changes. So at this point, you shall have reached your root cause, and you shall have identified that your root cause was inadequate system control over reagent lot verification and SOP enforcement. So you'll have a structured final SOP statement. For example, in this case, after the investigation, you'll say that the EQA outlier occurred due to absence of a structured and enforced lot-to-lot verification process following reagent change, leading to a systematic positive bias. After having your root cause, you need to do a corrective action. Let's talk about corrective action. And I'll emphasize at this point that corrective action aims to address the immediate problem. Think of it like CPR. CPR, when somebody collapses from cardiac arrest, what do we do? You don't start asking, oh, what's this person's diet? This person has been drinking maybe Coca-Cola for ages. We don't start analyzing the cholesterol history of this person when they've just collapsed from cardiac arrest. Instead, you are performing a CPR because the CPR is urgent. It will help stabilize this patient. It will save the moment. But CPR is not going to cure the heart disease that this guy has. Same way in the laboratory, if an EQA result is biased, our corrective action is like CPR. So CPR or corrective action that we will do once we realize that our EQA results are biased. You'll do things like you'll recalibrate the analyzer, you'll repeat your QC, you'll verify the reagent lot, you'll review potentially affected patient results, and then you finally document the incident. These actions will stabilize your system. They'll stop ongoing damage. But, and this is important, is that corrective action alone does not guarantee that the problem won't happen again. If you only perform CPR every time some patient collapses, we end up not practicing medicine. We are practicing maybe rescue. And in quality management, corrective action is rescue. It is necessary, corrective action is urgent, and it is life-saving. But corrective action is incomplete. And that is why preventive action exists. Preventive action is like healthy living, what corrective action is, if corrective action is CPR. So healthy living individuals do things like having a balanced diet, regularly exercising, you don't skip leg days, you do blood pressure monitoring, routine medical checkups, and these actions aim at preventing the heart attack from happening in the first place. So in the laboratory context, preventive action will include things like developing a mandatory lot-to-lot verification. In the case of our HbA1c that was biased, a preventive action will be like you develop a mandatory lot-to-lot verification SOP, you require supervisory sign-off before releasing a new reagent lot, you schedule monthly QC trend review meetings, you implement maintenance tracking systems, you do regular competency assessments. So you realize that prevention will always be stronger than correction because these actions will prevent, will strengthen the system before failure occurs. And the key difference between corrective action and preventive action is that corrective action responds to the crisis. Preventive action builds resilience. So if a laboratory only performs corrective actions, you will be continuously fighting emergencies in your laboratories. But if it implements preventive actions, you realize that emergencies become rare. And accreditation bodies don't just look for corrective actions. They don't look for the CPR. They look for healthy living systems. And ultimately, patient safety improves when prevention becomes routine. And a mature laboratory does not just wait for cardiac arrest. A mature laboratory will always implement, promote healthy living. So you've done your root cause analysis, you've done your corrective action, you've done your preventive action. Let's talk about CAPA documentation. CAPA is corrective and preventive action. So a good documentation, a good investigation without proper documentation is invisible. We say if it was not documented, it was not done. So you have to document, and CAPA documentation asks, will seek to answer key questions. Questions like what happened, when did it occur, what was the impact, what was the root cause, what corrective action was taken, what preventive action was implemented, and how will effectiveness of this preventive action be verified. So documentation will show logical thinking and not just actions. And in your CAPA documentation, you need to avoid statements that we often see like human error was corrected. Instead, you need to be specific. You need to write things like, for example, root cause was identified as absence of a formal lot-to-lot verification SOP. Preventive action, developed and implemented documented verification protocol with supervisor sign-off. And also remember, auditors will look for evidence of effectiveness. Yes, you've documented that you have your preventive action. The auditor, if CANAS comes, they look for evidence of effectiveness. And that means follow-up. Did QC stability improve? Did bias reduce in the subsequent EQA rounds? And if there's no effectiveness monitoring, it means that your CAPA is incomplete, and strong documentation always demonstrates system maturity. On the other hand, weak documentation suggests reactive quality management, and CAPA is not paperwork. We need to move from calling CAPA paperwork. It's a proof that learning and improvement occurred. So let's discuss something that's very important, and this is where most laboratories or laboratories in general go wrong during root cause analysis. So even the experienced labs always fall into these traps when it comes to root cause analysis. The first pitfall in root cause analysis is blaming individuals immediately. This is always immediate. EQA has failed immediately. Who did, when the outlier occurs, the first reaction of the entire lab, who ran the test? But quality failures are rarely about incompetence. As I said earlier, even incompetence or human error occurs within weak systems, and they are always about weak systems. And if we create a culture of blame, you'll realize that your staff are hiding errors instead of reporting these errors. And a hidden error, my friends, is far more dangerous than visible errors. The second pitfall in root cause analysis is stopping the investigation too early. You are stopping at superficial causes. For example, you stop at the calibration was wrong. Yes, it was wrong, but why was it wrong? If we stop at the first visible issue, we will only be treating the symptom. And surface level RCA always lead to repeated failures. The third pitfall is copy-paste investigations. So you find that some labs write the same root cause repeatedly, and the root cause you find that is human error. And as an auditor, you'll recognize this immediately. If everything is human error, it means that the system has not been examined deeply. You're just copy-pasting your investigations. The fourth pitfall is that there is no effectiveness monitoring. You don't follow up on the effectiveness. So if you implement your preventive action, we've said you need to check 3 months later whether your bias was improved. And if you do not monitor for effectiveness, you cannot prove that an improvement occurred. And finally, the final common pitfall that we have is treating EQA as compliance instead of improvement. So when you view EQA as a regulatory burden, investigations become superficial. But when EQA is viewed as a learning tool, investigations become meaningful, and quality culture always determines the depth of RCA. Now let's move from theory to practical tools. My HB1C failed. I did my investigation. So you don't need expensive software to improve RCA. People say, oh, you have to pay a lot of money for troubleshooting tools or things like that. You don't need this expensive software. You just need a structure. And here are some of the simple tools that will make a significant difference. A simple RCA template, just one page. A simple RCA template will ensure that there is consistency and completeness in your investigation. Things like a reagent lot-to-lot verification form will ensure that no new lot is used without documented comparison. EQA investigation checklists, QC trend review meetings. So monthly QC trend review meetings, you'll be able to identify trends over time beyond the daily QC review. Maintenance tracking log, and if maintenance is automated or scheduled visibly, you realize that calibration issues start reducing. And a CAPA tracking sheet so that you don't forget preventive actions. Most of the times you find that you document CAPA, file it somewhere and forget it. But with the tracking sheet, you'll do the CAPA, preventive action, document it, and it won't be forgotten. So remember, guys, that consistency will always beat complexity. And many high-performing laboratories will use very simple systems. And these simple systems, they enforce them consistently. And quality maturity is about discipline. It's not about sophistication. You don't have to be sophisticated to have a robust quality culture. And this brings me to the tail end of my presentation or of our discussion today. In summary, some of the things, the core lessons that we had from today, we've learned today as a reminder. First, we've learned that an EQA outlier is a signal and not a failure. Secondly, we've learned that always verify submission accuracy before investigating deeply. Verify that the correct unit was submitted. Verify that the decimal points were placed correctly. Verify that the peer group submission was done correctly. Third, use structured tools for RCA investigation. Don't do informal guessing. Don't say, oh, maybe it was Caspal who did it. Who did it? Caspal is always incompetent, things like that. Fourth, you have to differentiate random errors from systemic weaknesses. A random error is a one-off. A systemic weakness shows how an underlying issue that needs to be addressed. Fifth, you need to correct immediately, like CPR. You do your corrective action. Then, after correcting immediately, you prevent permanently. Seventh, you have to document clearly and monitor effectiveness. And if you consistently apply these principles, EQA performance will improve naturally. And more importantly, patient safety improves. And that's the real purpose of quality systems. Quality systems show us a target to improve patient safety and improve our quality culture. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end. And at this point, any questions are welcome. Kevin.
Yes, Caspal, thank you so much for quite an insightful and elaborate presentation. There are quite a number of questions in the chat box. And before we go to the questions, I wanted to highlight that the reason why Keton is so much focused in quality and capacity building in the lab is because we want to always ensure that there's always diagnostic accuracy in our labs. So Keton Limited is one of the EQA providers. We do send EQA samples to various labs. We only enroll with us and we send you samples annually. It can be either monthly, quarterly, or semi-annually. And I wanted to show you how you can be able to just review the EQA programs that we have and the panels that we are able to offer. So allow me to share my screen a bit, Caspal, and then we go to the questions in a minute.
Okay.
Yes. So when you go to Google, the EQA material that we do supply is called European Society for EQA. So it's in short form, it's ESF EQA. It is called the European Society for EQA. So when you go to Google, you can just be able to search ESF EQA. And then when you click on the first link, it will take you to the homepage of the EQA programs that we do distribute or we do supply. So in case you have got any queries, this EQA provider or these EQA samples that we do distribute are accredited by ISO 17043. And here, when you go to that website, you can be able to see the accreditation certificate just for compliance. And in case you're having auditors, you can be able to see also the annex to accreditation certificate. That is the accreditation scope. It will list for you which panels or which analytes are we accredited to offer in our EQA programs. And then it will also take you to our calendar of EQA so that you can be able to know when which program starts. And most importantly that I wanted to highlight is the EQA catalog. So if you're wondering which programs do we have and which programs do we not have, you see, some other providers, they could be having limited programs, but for us, we have got end-to-end EQA programs for laboratories. Maybe in terms of biochemistry, you could be having panels for bilirubin for neonates. We have got that. Blood gas and electrolytes. If you have got, if you're doing an analysis for blood gas and electrolytes, maybe it's in the ICU or in your routine lab, you can be able to get EQA samples from us. If it's cardiac markers, you're looking at troponin T, troponin I, CKMB, CK, all that line. We have got samples for cardiac markers. If it's the routine clinical chemistry, that one you know. If it's coagulation, you're doing the coagulation factors, you're doing prothrombin, anti-prothrombin time, all that. If you're doing INR, all that line, we have samples for that. Co-oximetry, you're doing CSF diagnostics, that is CSF protein, CSF glucose, LDH, all that. Drugs of abuse, ethanol, fecal occult blood, glucose for point of care, HbA1c, prothrombin time, and under POCT, all that for biochemistry we have. And then if you're looking at immunoassay programs, we have got HCG in serum as one analyte, and then we also have hormones, PCT, specific proteins, thyroid antibody, that is anti-TG, TSH receptor antibodies, anti-thyroid peroxidase, that is TPO, all that. And then if you're looking at tumor markers, and then we also have a combined program for tumor markers and hormones. And then we also have microbiology programs. If you're looking at getting samples for adenovirus, aspergillus, bacteriology, if you're looking at samples for blood culture, we send you samples for blood culture. We can also send you samples for urine culture. We also have got samples for routine ID, that is bacterial identification, and then you also do an antimicrobial sensitivity testing. So we have got all that, and I'm going very fast to beat time. And then if you're also looking at molecular programs, we have got molecular programs for hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV and COVID. And then for hematology, if you're doing blood grouping, ESR, hematology 3-part, hematology 5-part, immunohematology, that is for blood transfusion labs, all that is covered. And then we also have got educational programs. So we just give you a case study, you analyze as an individual, and then you report what is your diagnosis or what is your interpretation of that case study. So I have put my email in the chat box. If you have any query that you need us to address, if you want to enroll for EQA, we welcome you to partner with us as Keton. We'll be able to ship you the samples on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis or a semi-annual basis, provided that you select a program that suits the capacity of your lab. So if the capacity of your lab is probably for a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, we will be able to support you. So I would like now to go back to the chat box and just be able to see the questions that have been addressed to Caspal. And also if you feel like you need to speak, you can be able just to raise your hand, and then I'll give you the microphone and you can just address your question one-on-one. So Caspal, in the chat box, the first question was from Collins Oga, okay? Collins Oga said, nice presentation, Caspal. On IQC review with regards to EQA failure, what approach can be adopted for hematology CBC controls with a bias? Caspal?
Okay, thank you very much, Collins, for the excellent and very practical question, especially in CBC, where we know that some subtle shifts can be missed. So if you have an EQA failure with an apparent bias in hematology, so you'll move your IQC review from beyond the within range thinking. So you'll first need to confirm if is it truly biased? So before your deep investigation, you'll ask questions like, is the deviation in the same direction across multiple parameters, HB, MCV, things like that? Is this deviation consistent across levels? Is it both high and low or high and normal? And is there a trend in your LJ control chart? So this bias, you will typically see the bias when there is a persistent shift above or below the mean on one side, or if you have multiple QC points on one side of the mean. Sometimes when you are reviewing your LJ charts, you'll see the drifts over time. So after that, you need to stop checking if my QC is just within the plus or minus 2 SD. When you are reviewing your LJ charts properly, you look at rules like the 70, which 7 points on one side, 10x rule. So these gradual upwards or downward shifts in things like platelets, where the QC is still falling within range, but there might be a calibration shift. So once you've checked if it's an actual bias, you've reviewed your LJ charts, you compare all your 3 control levels. So if the bias is present across all the levels, it might be a calibration issue. If it's present only on one level, it might be a control material issue. So you need to distinguish very well if it's an analyzer issue or a control material issue. And one thing that maybe I'll just mention in passing, which is a very strong thing that we do, is patient averages. You check for patient moving averages. Maybe has your average HB shifted compared to previous months? Previously, you were getting HB 15, 16, around there. Then suddenly, your average HB is at 17. So this patient moving averages will mean that if it has shifted towards the same direction as the QC, it will strengthen the evidence that your analyzer is biased. Then you'll definitely review calibration and reagent history. You compare peer groups in your EQA. Then when you do your kappa and preventive action. So the danger, especially in hematology, is that if QC is within range, we are fine. But you realize that if there's a shift from maybe 15 grams per DL in HB to 15.8, it might still be within limits, but it's a bias. And most of the time, EQA will detect it. So you, as a strong laboratory, you need to detect it before EQA does detect it.
Thank you for that response. I think you've answered it extensively. The next question is from Musumba. Musumba is asking, what is the relation between corrective action, and preventive action? And how are they used in NCRCA management?
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Musumba. I'll repeat the difference between corrective action and preventive action. I said that corrective action is an immediate fix to the problem. You are addressing the symptom. You have a fever, you are addressing the fever. I'm giving you maybe the immediate thing is I'm taking off the heavy clothing that you have. So if you recalibrate your analyzer immediately after EQA failure, that's a corrective action. And corrective action will eliminate the root cause of the detected nonconformity. So it will eliminate the fact that this thing was biased. But preventive action, on the other hand, addresses the system. It eliminates the causes of a potential future nonconformity. Preventive action is more of a proactive approach to EQA outlier troubleshooting and addressing.
Okay. Another question from Violet Kisato. How is effectiveness of failure measured, stroke monitored, and after which period of time?
Thank you very much, Violet, for your question. I mentioned about the effectiveness monitoring. So effectiveness effectiveness monitoring is measured by confirming that the problem does not recur and that the process performance improved, and also monitoring to show that the root cause was truly eliminated. So some of the common monitoring methods that you'd implement will be like reviewing subsequent EQA cycles. My uric acid failed this month. I implemented corrective action. Yes, I calibrated my reagent. I need to monitor next month as uric acid failed again. The next, another way of monitoring is to analyze QC trends. If you had a bias, you have to monitor if your mean returns to the target and there's no drift. You'll be checking for Westguard rule violations. Then you need to monitor for, if you had a preventive action, you need to check for the compliance. If you had a new SOP implemented, you need to audit the compliance to this SOP. Then you review things like maintenance and calibration records. Then you monitor related analytes. On the question, monitoring is done with objective data. You don't do with assumption. On your question of after how long, this mostly depends on the process and test frequency. So general guidance that I always give is that you have three stages of 3 intervals. You have to do a short-term check. Within 1 to 4 weeks after implementation, you check for stability of your QC. Then in the medium term, maybe in the next EQA sample, if you are doing after 1 month or after 3 months, that's the medium term. Then in the long term, after 2 or 3 EQA cycles or 3 to 6 months, do you have a stable QC? So at least 1 full EQA cycle would show you if whatever you implemented is working.
Another question from Musumba is asking, at what point do you conclude that the error is random?
At what point do you conclude that the error is random? So I mentioned that after structured checks, if there is no evidence of a systematic problem, so if it's a single isolated event, you've checked that your QC before and after the event was stable, there was no shift, there was no trend, everything, there was no reagent change, there was no calibration, there was no maintenance, there was no lot changes. Then, and there's also no similar issue among with other analytes, and the subsequent EQA or repeat testing is acceptable. Let's say I've run my uric acid. 1 week later, I get my results. I still have my sample. I've done my initial investigation. My submission was okay. QC, IQC was fine. Everything was fine. Then I take that sample and I do a rerun, and it's okay. Then I can conclude that that was a single isolated event, and it's random. It's not reproducible. It's not recurring, and it's not supported by any data trends. So it is random.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wilfred says, great and informative presentation. Would like more sessions on QMS. So if you'd like more sessions on QMS, we do present webinar presentations as well. We do trainings in-house. You can reach out to us. We can be able to do mentorship and trainings that suits the need of your laboratory. So you can reach out to us. You can send me an email on sales1@ketonconsulting.com, and then I'll be able to support you and customize trainings for you. Stephen Otieno says, how much is the cost of hematology EQA registration, or maybe the price list for EQA registration? Stephen, this I think I'll have to reach out to you personally, but now that I don't have your contact, maybe you can drop me a WhatsApp message or send me an email at sales1@ketonconsulting.com, and then I'll be able to guide you on the costings for the specific programs that you need. So just send me an email. My email address is ketonconsulting.com. Philip Maingi says, what tools do you use to measure and monitor the effectiveness of the corrective and preventive actions taken? After how long do you review the effectiveness of CAPA taken? Caspal.
Yes, thank you very much, Philip. These are good practical questions. I've mentioned that in monitoring the effectiveness of your CAPA, you use objective data and not opinion. So the first thing that you'll be doing is you'll be using your leveraging charts to do your QC trend analysis, mean shift, trends, and stability of your standard deviation. Are there any Westgard rules violation? So if the QC stabilizes and remains within limits, this is a good sign. Then another thing that you'll be using to monitor are the subsequent EQA performance. Your next EQA cycle results. Was the bias reduced? Was there an improvement in your Z-score? There's no recurrence of failure. So EQA, as we know, is the strongest external confirmation that something was corrected. Then also you can use compliance check. You do audits, internal audits and compliance checks. Is your SOPs adhered to if you implemented an SOP? Is there documentation review? Is there a reassessment of staff competency? So these compliance checks or audits will confirm to you that that process change was implemented. Then as a lab, you develop your key performance indicators. You check for reduction in repeat errors, maybe percentage reduction across a year. I need less than 0.1% in repeat errors. A reduction in decrease in instrument downtime, fewer NCs related to the same issue. The frequency, as I've mentioned, you can do 3 levels. Short-term check within 1 month, that is 1 week to 4 weeks. Medium check within the next EQA sample if it is within 1 to 3 months. Then long-term confirmation, 3 to 6 months or 1 year without any recurrence. So for high volume tests, you need to increase the frequencies. So tests like CBC or chemistry, you increase the frequencies.
Thank you, Caspal. Nelson Bet, actually you gave a link on the Google. Kindly repeat, I didn't get it well. Okay, Nelson, the link that I gave is European Society for EQA, ESF EQA. European Society for EQA, that's the Google link. So you just search European Society for EQA or ESF EQA, and you'll get that link. So that link will give you the accreditation certificate, the scope of accreditation, the calendar, the catalog. We also have a troubleshooting guide on the same website. We also have a report interpretation guide on the same website. So in case you are enrolled to our EQA programs, you will see a step-by-step guide to interpretation and to troubleshooting of EQA outliers. So that it's quite explained. So we just advise you that you look at the website. In case you want to enroll, like I said, send me an email at sales1@ketonconsulting.com. To the next question, Caspal.
Yes.
In the machine for biochemistry, do we use calculated mean or reference mean?
I'm trying to check the question.
Stephen Otieno, in the machine for biochemistry, do we use calculated mean or reference mean?
I'm trying to understand that Stephen is trying to ask in regards to IQC, right? So if it's in regards to IQC, it's always determined by the lab. There are labs that use manufacturer-provided means, but as a standard good quality practice, you use manufacturer-provided means for a defined number of runs, mostly 20 runs when you have a statistically significant sample population. After your 20 runs, you have your calculated mean, or what we call cumulative mean. So after 20 runs in your IQC, you'd use your calculated means. Before that, you use your manufacturer-provided means. But it varies from lab to lab, and it requires a discussion with the lab quality management team to understand what is best for the patient. But best practice is that use reference mean until you have a statistically significant population to have a calculated mean.
Thank you. Paul has given us a case study. He says, I got 2 samples for HbA1c EQA analysis. I ran the tests concurrently on the same equipment, everything correctly. The first sample, I got 100% score. The second, I got unacceptable results. Putting in mind, I ran in a span of 5 minutes on the same conditions. Any root cause? Caspal.
This is a good question, and this is exactly what structured thinking. This is where structured thinking will be important. So, if both HbA1c EQA samples were run on the same analyzer, they were run within 5 minutes, same reagent, same calibration, and the same operator, where one, and you still end up that one was acceptable 100%, the other was unacceptable. So this might suggest a sample-specific or a random error and not a global analyzer bias. So the first question that you'll ask yourself is, was the unacceptable result extremely high or extremely low compared to your peer group, or was it just borderline outside the limit? So if there's a gross difference between your unacceptable sample value to the peer mean, it means that there might be a sample handling issue. But if it's a borderline difference, it might just be a statistical variation. So in this scenario, there might be a sample reconstitution error. The most likely causes a sample reconstitution error. And if it was lyophilized, you check, was the correct diluent volume used? The mixing, was it complete? Things like sample homogeneity. Things like HbA1c, you find if you didn't mix it adequately before it was aspirated, the cells were settled. If you are using whole blood, cells were settled, or there were clots or microclots in the sample. Another issue might be an aspiration or probe issue. If it's borderline, I've said it was. If it was just marginal, it might be a statistical variation. So it might not be a random. It could be a random analytical variation, I mean. So if both tests were run within 5 minutes, it's unlikely that it was not a calibration problem. It was not a reagent lot bias. It was not an analyzer systemic bias. So because if it were any of these systemic issues, it would affect both of your samples similarly. So to conclude your root cause, you'll need to check your QC results immediately before and after if you still have the sample, you repeat testing it, then you compare the magnitude of the deviation, then you review the QC process, the reconstitution process, I mean, carefully. So if the QC was stable, there was no drift, no recurrence, it was one isolated failure. It's most likely random and or a sample handling variation. Thank you.
Thank you, Caspal. Rotich Nelson says it was a very nice and informative presentation. Thank you, Caspal and Keton team. And then Sarati Avukusi is asking the difference between SDI and Z-score.
Thank you very much, Sarati, for your question. So both SDI is standard deviation index, and the Z-score, both of these measure how far a value is from the mean in terms of standard deviations, but they're always used in different contexts. SDI is often used in quality controls, and it will compare your test result against the reference value or the target value. So it simply indicates whether a result deviates significantly from the expected standard. The Z-score, in the other hand, which is a general statistical measure, it tells you the relative position of the data point within the data set. So it shows you how many standard deviations your value is above or below the mean.
Okay. Omar is asking, please comment on preventive action and risk analysis and their role. in non-conformance management as far as ISO 15189-2022 is concerned?
So thank you, Mari. I'll give a brief comment. ISO 15189-2022 clauses 5.6 and 8.51 tell us about risk analysis. Clause 8.5.2 and 8.6 mostly tell us about preventive action. So these ones in non-conformance management, they give us, they guide us towards a proactive approach, because risk analysis and preventive action will reduce the likelihood and the severity of non-conformities occurring. Then they also give us a reactive framework. So if the NC occurs, risk analysis will determine the urgency and extent of the corrective action. That is from clause 8.7 of the ISO document. Then there are a continuous loop. So non-conformity, your non-conformity will feed into your risk assessment. Then it will help you update your preventive measure, then helps you in continuous improvement, and the cycle continues. A fits into B, B fits into C. So the bottom line is that in ISO 15189 in the 2022 version, the standalone preventive action that we had previously has been replaced with an integrated risk-based analysis thinking method, where you first analyze the risk, implement a preventive action, so that overall the quality system is improved better. Thank you.
Thank you, Caspal. Sarati has asked, what is the interpretation for a past EQA with a failed IQC?
A past EQA. So that would be an issue with your IQC. And I'm assuming that it's your IQC is consistently failing. EQA gives us the accuracy. It means you are accurate, but you're not precise. IQC is a precision measure. EQA is an accuracy measure. As we said, that EQA is like a stress test for your laboratory. Is my system working well? Such that if I run my sample here, somebody runs it in a peer lab in Mombasa or in the US, is it going to give us the same value or an acceptable value, such that clinical decisions will be made in the same way? So if your EQA is failing, it means you are inaccurate. If your EQA is passing, you are accurate. Your IQC is failing, you are not precise. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've answered all the questions. The rest are just compliments. So unless somebody's having another question, you can raise your hand. We'll give you the microphone so that you can speak on the microphone and ask your question. Yes, Fredo here, you can unmute your microphone and speak. Fredo here.
Morning to everyone.
Morning.
Hello. Yes, thanks for that good presentation. It's a good insight. Just a comment regarding there was issue of somebody asked about LJ chart plotting. But in my comment, you talked of there's this issue of the moving mean and the fixed mean. And ideally, it's always required to use a fixed mean, because it will give you a true picture of the bias if there's a bias. Like as compared to the moving mean sometimes it might you might overlook issues regarding the warnings as per the Westgate rule. So the advice and the recommended is used a fixed mean. Yeah.
Caspal,
And
what
then
do you
the other
think?
thing that thing that I expected. Okay, this is something that I've observed over time. In regarding the EQA results, guys need to pay attention on the summary, not just pass and fail, or they need to pay attention on the statistical values like a Z-score, because that is the catch point, or the SDIs, because I've witnessed some providers, mostly in biochemistry, biochemistry, like, let's say, for example, sodium. If you look at this, the overall score is acceptable, but if you look at the range and the lab results and the range, it's telling you something. It's telling you these are failed, these are failed, a failed run or a failed EQA. So one of the things that guys need to pay attention on their EQA summary report is not the overall outcome. Yes, the overall outcome, fine, you've passed, but you've passed at what level, right? Just a contribution there. Thank you. You're out.
Thank you, Frederick. I would like Caspal to comment on the issue of floating mean versus fixed mean.
Thank you very much.
Proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred, for your comment. That's very much welcome. As I had mentioned, the use of floating and fixed mean is always a lab quality policy definition issue. There are labs that, and I mentioned statistical significance of your cumulative mean. When you have like 100 runs, let's say statistically significant starts at 20, but let's say you've had 140 runs. Over time, there is a stability around your mean and your SD and your CV, such that a single point might not result into such a big bias that will be clinically significant to your influencing your patient values. But this is also another very long discussion as regards IQC and IQC review. And I think, Kevin, this is an invitation that you need to also have a session on IQC. I understand that Keton has some of the best consultancy services as a result regards IQC. So this is also an invitation that you can schedule a meeting on IQC. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be able to review, and if at all we can schedule a webinar on IQC. We've done third-party controls, so I think it's only the statistical evaluation, whether do we fit to the manufacturer mean, or do we develop our own lab mean and use our own floating mean moving forward. So that's a long discussion for the lab, but like Caspal has mentioned, it's all with the lab policy. What does your SOP say in terms of IQC analysis and IQC evaluation? So it's not universal. Every lab has got their own policies. Thank you, Frederick. Any other question? Somebody can raise their hand before we wind up. I think we have up to 8:30 to close the meeting. In case you have any question, you can just unmute your mic. You don't have a question, I think we will be closing the meeting at 8:30. So you can still be able to just drop a question in the chat box or raise your hand and pick the mic, but the meeting will officially end at 8:30. Thank you. I'll also be sharing our EQA catalog in the WhatsApp group. So if at all you need to enroll or you want to have a conversation, you can side chat me. I'll be able to share with you the pricings like Steven was asking previously. So I'll just share the catalog in the group and you'll be able to see the programs that we do have for EQA programs. And we also have third-party control. So if at all that is your area of interest, you can just side chat me in the WhatsApp group and we'll be able to support you. Otherwise, I wish you a very good day ahead and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you.